He took the reins off Pat. He wanted to have 8 million footnotes and 1,000 sources, but
I know you call it contemporary critical theory in your book, but let's get to a definition of what you're talking about when you talk about those sorts of things.
Sure, it's a good thing to start with is defining your terms. So critical theory is an umbrella category today. It goes back to the writings of Karl Marx, then later at the Frankfurt School, they coined the term critical theory. But since then, that was 80, 90 years ago, since then, the category has evolved and spawned entire new disciplines. So things like critical race theory, queer theory, critical pedagogy, post-colonial theory, these are all today various critical social theories that would fall within that umbrella category of critical theory writ large. And in our book, you're right, we coin a new phrase, contemporary critical theory, to sort of identify the 4 core ideas that connect all of these sub-disciplines within the critical tradition. So those 4 ideas are the social binary, hegemonic power, lived experience, and social justice. So just in one sentence each, the social binary refers to the way a critical theorist thinks society is divided between oppressor groups and oppressed groups along lines of race, class, gender, sexuality, physical ability, age, and a host of other factors. Then how is that oppression taking place today in modern Western liberal societies? It's not happening through overt cruelty and injustice and tyranny. They would say, no, it's rather happening through what's called hegemonic power, the second idea. So they would say that in every society, the ruling class, whether it's whites, men, heterosexuals, Christians, the able-bodied, they impose their ideas about race, their norms, their values, their standards. They impose those standards on culture in a way that appears to us natural, objective, neutral, even God ordained. But those values actually privilege and advance the agenda of the ruling class, again, whether it's whites, men, heterosexuals, Christians. So that's how oppression takes place. And then all of us are socialized into those systems of white supremacy, patriarchy, heterosexism, cisgenderism, ableism. So how do we see through that? How do we see that these supposedly neutral objective values are actually mechanisms for oppression? Well, that's through the third idea, lived experience. So oppressed groups, whether it's women or people of color, LGBTQ people, disabled people, they can see the way in which the ruling class has imposed their values on culture. And then that gives them the authority to speak about their lived experience and to lead the rest of us who are blinded by our privilege out of our oppression. And that's the end goal. The fourth idea of contemporary critical theory is that we're working towards social justice, which to them means the elimination of all forms of social oppression and the dismantling of systems and structures that perpetuate these oppressions. So in a nutshell, that's what unifies all these various critical theories today, whether it's critical race theory, queer theory, post-colonial theory, or whatever.
All right, thank you. Dr. Sawyer, do you have anything to add to that? Or?
Yeah, I would just reinforce that critical theory is about power, how power is manifested in society, particularly in our social systems and institutions. And some people are left outside of that power, outside of the status quo. And those people are marginalized and disenfranchised. And critical theory, based upon its own prescription and ideas and beliefs and pre-commitments and prescription for the world, is attempting to empower those who have been disempowered, to give power to those who have been marginalized. And that's really the campaign, and that dovetails into what Neil was saying in terms of the social justice perspective of critical social theory. And again, that power, primarily the concern from the critical social theorist, is how that power is located in institutions and societal systems, not so much on the individual level and not, as Neil mentioned, having to do with coercive or violent power, thinking of hegemonic power, dominant power manifested in cultural systems and norms and so forth. And I would just say that, as Karl Marx is really that first that first critical theorist. The Frankfurt School in the 1920s and 30s is where the term critical theory came about. And the Frankfurt School was an extension and an expansion and an amendment to Marxism, both an extension and an amendment to Marxism. Critical social theory that we see today manifested in a number of critical social theories, like Neil mentioned, critical pedagogy, critical race theory, postcolonialism, queer theory. Critical social theory today is really an extension and an amendment to historic critical theory. And so that kind of gives kind of a through line in terms of how we've landed in terms of where we are now. In that convention of contemporary critical theory that we have, these 4 ideas that Neil mentioned do permeate all of these critical social theories, but we do want to underscore that that's not all that they talk about. We're not trying to truncate it in a way. We just are labeling it contemporary critical theory because these are the ideas that are having the most stranglehold on our society today. It's our current zeitgeist. And these ideas are really impacting the church. So that's why Neil and I have isolated them.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I kind of want to rewind a little bit because of, like we said initially, I want to go to a quote you have in your book. On page 34, you say, "Too often books that oppose wokeness are long on criticism but short on scholarship." I really resonate with that. Like I said before, I appreciated those other works for what they were, but I did find that to be the case. Was that the impetus for why you guys put the effort into compiling this, where you kind of like, someone needs to do it, it might as well be us?
Yeah, we've been speaking and talking about this stuff, writing about it for what, 5 or 6 years now, Pat. And we were hoping, we naively assumed that the church would get its act together. Once we kind of showed people what was wrong with these ideas, it would blow over and be a fad. The church at least would say, "Oh yeah, this is unbiblical." Well, that didn't happen. And Pat, in like 2018 was it? Pat was already saying, we got to write a book. So it took a while. Now, why was it written the way we did it? We did want to write a book that was scholarly, that was clearly academic. Now it's accessible. I've been told by readers that yes, it's clearly scholarly and academic, but it's also readable. You don't have to be a PhD or even a college graduate to read this. My son's a freshman in high school, and he can read it and understand it and appreciate it. So.
He's exceptionally sharp, though. Jim.
Well, he's a precocious freshman in high school, but nonetheless, we want it to be both a high level scholarship and also accessible to a layperson. But why? Yeah, I do think one of the main motivations was not so much the superficiality of other treatments. I don't think that's the main thing. The main reason actually was the pushback that other books got. I think in general, these books, some that you named, and there are others you could mention, like John McWhorter's Woke Racism, and I mean, I have a whole bookshelf of these books. I mainly read critical theorists, but I occasionally will read the other side. But they would get pushback from, frankly, woke people with the most not very relevant objections sometimes. These books were often, they were right over the target in terms of what they were trying to say, but they didn't cite the right people or not enough people, or they're cherry picking their sources or whatever, on and on and on. And we got fed up with it. And so we just said, we're going to write this bulletproof text that no one will be able to claim that it is superficial, that it's not really understanding these theories, that it's not letting them speak for themselves. So our book has 770 plus footnotes. We cite around 200 primary source texts. We don't just reference them in passing. We have block quotes, thousands of words of primary source quotes. So we show our work. We're not just telling you what these theorists believe. We're letting them speak for themselves. And, and it's it is a long book, and it would be 3 times as long if I let Pat, took the reins off Pat. He wanted to have 8 million footnotes and 1,000 sources, but we have, I think, I'm glad that you appreciated the level of scholarship because we really tried to make it bulletproof.
Hey, don't click out of it yet. Don't click out of this video yet. There's a lot more where that came from. If you like that content, it came from a larger show, FT Monthly. You can click on the playlist and get more there, and a lot more on our YouTube channel. Subscribe, like, and share.